Sup guys, Hero Vortex here and I'm back here with another FNF theory, and for today's theory I'm gonna of course cover yet another update that was briefly teased in the FNF Song Pack 2 trailer, and this update is one that everyone, myself included, is excited for. Yep, today folks, we're gonna be talking about the next playable character, so let's get started. Okay, let's first talk about characters we know are gonna become playable in the future. We know that Tinkman, Hank, oh right, I forgot about that. But yeah, let's first start talking about Tinkman. Since the beginning of FNF, Tinkman has always promised to be a playable character alongside Pico and Hank. And since Pico was already added as a playable character last year, we can assume that Tinkman's time in the spotlight will come soon as well. Not only that, but there is already a lot of evidence that supports that he'll become the next playable character in the future. The first piece of evidence is that this concept art for his miss animations in the game's files. Second is that he has an unused character select nameplate, which can also be found in the game's files. Third is that, as I mentioned earlier, is that he has promised to be a playable character since the beginning. And since Pico, another promised playable character, became unlockable in the base game, we can assume that Tinkman will get his chance to shine as a playable character soon. The fourth piece of evidence of him becoming playable soon is the fact there's a screenshot of the character select screen which has his free play icon on it. Of course, this could have been a way for them to see how the icons would have looked on the character select screen, so take this one with a grain of salt. And the final piece of evidence is that there's an unused voice line of Tinkman making fun of Daddy Dearest.
Old man's got moves. Bummer you raised a whore though. Ooh.
Of course, this feels like something Captain would say after you lose to him in a Week 7 song, rather than a random line he would say to Daddy in a Week 1 Tinkman mix. But more on that later. For now, let's talk about the next confirmed playable character, Hank. Hank, just like Tinkman and Pico, was also a promised playable character since the beginning of FNF, and even though we're still yet to see him in any official base game content, we still know that he's going to become a playable character soon, thanks to a few clues. One is that he appears in the announcement for future playable characters alongside Pico and Tinkman, so we know he's coming. And lastly, in the TikTok version of the Song Part 2 trailer, we can see an update called Madness, which could act as a level where Hank becomes playable, similar to how Pico first becomes playable in Weekend 1. And the reason why I say this is because each playable character might have a unique name for the levels they star in, since BF stars in weeks while Pico only appears in weekends. And yes, weekends are only for Pico as confirmed by Fandom Arcade. And two is that Hank comes from Madness Combat, so the update which is called Madness not being about him would not make any sense. Yeah, despite Hank being a planned playable character, he for some reason doesn't have that much solid evidence for him becoming the third playable character, or at least until we see him in any future updates. But surprisingly, there's a character in the base game that surprisingly has more of a higher chance of becoming playable than the confirmed playable character Hank, Daddy Dearest. You're probably confused as to why I said Daddy Dearest will become playable. Well, I already explained this in my Dearest Dungeon video already, which you should check out by the way if you haven't. But yeah, to keep things simple, I'm just gonna summarize what I said then. First, the screenshot that I showed earlier has Daddy's free play icon on it, alongside Pico and Tinkman's ones. Second is that I theorize that Dearest Dungeon might be a non-BF level, and since Dearest is in the name, we can assume that if it is a level, then Daddy will most likely be the protagonist of that level. Third, it's a common trope in video games, especially fighting games, to have the main antagonist as a playable character. And we all know that FNF isn't afraid to take inspiration from that genre sometimes, so I wouldn't be surprised if this happened in the base game. Fourth, the Tinkman line that I mentioned earlier could easily work as a game over line for Stress Daddy mix. And finally, it would just be cool to play as Daddy Dearest, because the guy is just really awesome. But of course, the third playable character could be a character we're still yet to see in the game's story. Since FNF is still a demo, it means that most of the game's content will only appear in the finished product, meaning that some characters will only be seen later on in the story. But since the devs still haven't given us an exact estimation of how long the roadmap is, we can expect to see a couple new faces before the V-Slice era ends. and those never before known faces could easily become a playable character. And since Dave aka Phantom Arcade confirmed that he wants a majority of the base game's characters to be original characters, I don't be surprised if he extended that to the character select screen. Like maybe in the final game we could have 5 out of the 9 playable characters be OCs while the other 4 would just be Newgrounds characters like Pico, Hank, Tinkman, and some other popular Newgrounds character. Which I honestly hope does happen because as much as I love the cameo characters in the franchises they originate from, I do hope that we get more memorable base game OCs like Senpai, Spirit, or Daddy. Because even though my favorite FNF character is Pico, I love when Dave creates a goofy and wacky OC. And I hope that at least one of them get a chance to become playable in the future. Well, that's all I have for today, folks. Sorry for this one being shorter compared to my other videos, but I didn't really have much to say on this topic, especially since I already saw Dark Napoleon make his take on this theory, and I didn't want to kind of copy or mimic him. So I kind of just wanted to try thinking of my own stuff. But I think I did a good job with the theory. Especially since it's kind of hard to theorize when the game is still incomplete, and since now that Dave is now redoing the sprites, it might actually be a problem. I don't think this game is ever coming out. Yeah, but subscribe if you're new. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment on what you thought about the video. Uh, Also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. My username is the same there, so you can easily just look it up. Uh, Also shout out to Jameson Sloan for help making the thumbnail. He also helped make the one for my blamed Hex Mix thumbnail. So shout out to him. Give him a follow and check out his socials on Instagram and Twitter. I'll have them on the screen right now. With that said, I'm kind of done now. Anyway, later nerds.